Time and we have a quorum. Let me call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the panel on constitutional affairs, and we now invite the administration to come in. We'd like to welcome the Undersecretary, Mr. Lau Kong-wah, and also the PAS. Item 1 on the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. There is one. It is a letter from Dr. Kenneth CHAN to myself, and the letter has been copied to members. Item 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. Some people have raised their hands. Did you want to speak? Yes, Chairman. The newspaper has reported that there is a confidential paper within the administration saying that in Nansha and Hengqin, there will be the rental of 100 kilometers of land to build a Hong Kong place, saying that elderly homes and PRH would be built there. I'd like to ask the CMAB whether indeed there has been such a study. I hope the administration can be asked by you, Chairman, to forward study papers and also to report progress at our next meeting, please. Undersecretary. Dr. Helena Wong has painted quite a specific picture of such a study. Did it happen? Well, I think it is not to be discussed here at this panel. Because if you are talking about cooperation with the mainland, especially in terms of economic and trade affairs, then it is not to be discussed here. No, Chairman, what I'd like to ask is, did the CMAB conduct any study vis-à-vis cooperation with the mainland? Do you have relevant papers? Undersecretary. With regard to this report, the administration has already issued a statement or press release. There is no such thinking. No such thinking. No such thinking. Can you speak up? Speak into the microphone. I thought I was already very clear. No, I think Dr. Wong has difficulty listening to you. Is the Bureau clarifying that your Bureau did not write any study or did not commission anyone else to do such a study in November last year? Undersecretary, is it that I should answer the question here, Chairman? Well, the Chairman, she's asking you. If you know the answer, then tell her. If you say it is no, then you should say no then. Well, I'm not aware of such a situation. He has already answered you. So does it mean that other bureaus have written that paper? Well, he can't answer on behalf of other bureaus. He is not the CE nor the CS4A. His answer is no. Maybe you can take up the issue through other channels and to other high-ranking officials. Mr. Yip Kin Yun or Miss Ann Chang. Just like to remind Dr. Helena Wong that actually at noon today, the administration has already issued a statement that there is not such thinking and there is no such proposal either. So, Dr. Wong, maybe you can read the statement of the administration, and if you still have questions or if you'd like to seek more understanding, then you can raise the issue again. I think the administration has already issued that statement. Thank you. Thank you for that information. Well, Chairman, I have that press release with me. I'm asking for clarification here. The press release represents the stance of the administration. The Undersecretary has nothing to add. Any other questions? If not, Undersecretary, the next meeting will be on the 23rd of April. Is it that you like to propose 2 items? Yes, please. Shall we be told what they are? We'd like to arrange for discussion of 2 items at the next meeting. The first one, Ms. Priscilla Leung wrote a letter on the ECICO. She would like to discuss the matter. We think that it is appropriate to take this up at the next meeting. Well, apart from Ms. Priscilla Leung, maybe other members would also like to express views, would like to know those views beforehand. So that's the first item we are proposing. And that is to discuss the ways to deal with offences under the ordinance, and we'd like to listen to members. Secondly, there will be a briefing by the EOC chairman. Those 2. Okay, Ms. Priscilla Leung has proposed amendments to the ECICO. The letter from Ms. Leung has been tabled. Please read it if you're interested. I hope the administration will consider those views. And also, there will be 2 agenda items, including one by the EOC chairman. That's for your information. I see some hands. Dr. Kenneth CHAN, followed by Ms. Emily Lau. Chairman, as you said at the beginning of the meeting, I wrote you a letter, and I believe that has been received by members as well, and that is the head of the CPU, Mr. Xiu Shin-po, who expressed certain views amounting to the liaison office interfering into Hong Kong matters, and he is saying that we have to accept it, we have to understand it, and also perhaps agree with it. I'd like to know whether that represents the stance of the SARG. In the past, at the LegCo here, with regard to the liaison office intervening into Hong Kong matters, we have had lots of discussions here. I hope there could be some time earmarked at the next meeting to ask Mr. Xiu Shin-po here to listen to us and answer our questions. Under Secretary, I think I can only relate the view to the CPU. Because the CMAB does not represent the CPU, we'll take the view back. I don't know whether this administration has disintegrated in mid-air. Aren't you communicating internally? This is about a very important provision in the Basic Law, and i.e. Article 22 of the Basic Law. So are you just a courier? You don't even know whether Xiu Shin-po is telling a lie or telling the truth. You have no stance, you mean? You don't mind? Under Secretary. Chairman, if Dr. Kenneth CHAN would like to have a discussion on the contents of the Basic Law and get to know the stance of the administration, we are very happy to do that. But if you are talking about the views and opinions expressed by certain people, and you have actually stated that it is someone within the CPU, then in that case we can only relate to your view. And I believe some of these views, in fact, have been made known to that person. Well, this is not just any person. He is one of your core team. He is not just Tom, Dick, or Harry. So apart from relating the view, wouldn't you restate the stance of the administration and whether Mr. Xiu Shin-po's words represent the stance of the administration? Well, I have nothing to add, Chairman. I have already promised to relate that view. Ms. Emily Lau, I agree with Dr. Kenneth CHAN. This is a serious matter. Somebody said something, and some officials said that that wouldn't represent the stance of the administration. And I remember the SCMA said that Mr. Xiu Shin-po has his own unique personality. Now, I don't know whether Mr. Xiu represents the SARG. If he does, that's really a serious matter. And even if he doesn't, I think you should ask him to attend our House Committee meeting and explain to members what he is talking about. And maybe he should be asked to apologize and clarify his stance. Even if he is entitled to his own views, he should not be speaking too freely because he is an official. May I refer to the list of outstanding items, 11 and 13. You say they are to be confirmed. 11, report of the Independent Review Committee for the Prevention and Handling of Potential Conflicts of Interest. The administration says it's working on it, but it has taken a long time. Mr. C.Y. Leung said that he accepted those recommendations before he took office. Now, why is it that you are moving at a snail's pace? I think you should explain yourselves. And 13, it is even a simpler thing. Guidelines for CE in handling potential cases of conflict of interest and acceptance of advantages and entertainment containing politically appointed officials. This is online, but you have never come to the LegCo to give an account and also to discuss things with us. Can the Undersecretary promise to do something? Well, this may not be possible at the next meeting, but maybe at the meeting after the next. Undersecretary. So you're aware of that, huh? You should give an account next time to see when you can be ready to discuss it. No, Chairman, not to say when he is ready at the next meeting. I'm saying if he's not ready at the next meeting, please do that at the meeting after next. You are so skillful, Chairman. You always loosen the loop when I want to tighten it. No, but we have already got items for next month. Well, I understand. Undersecretary, please go back and really try to see when you can come back and give us an account. Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan? Well, actually, I don't think we should field the question to the Undersecretary. I think the panel here can just summon Mr. Xu Shinpo here. Never mind whether he is representing the administration, and we don't need the Undersecretary to clarify matters. Just ask Xu Shinpo to come, and my request is very simple. We should arrange a meeting for Xu Shinpo to come here and clarify his stance. But this panel has as its corresponding partner the CMAB, not the CPU. Well, Chairman, if that's the case, then the CPU is not working to or with anybody. The boss of the CPU should be the CS4A. Well, if that's the case, we should do it at the House. I don't think that's necessary. Our system doesn't stipulate which panel cannot ask which officials from which bureau not to come. Well, even if it is a labor issue, I can ask the FSTB to come because it might have something to do with the FSTB. Now, if he is stepping over the line, he is talking about constitutional development, then if he has stepped into our territory, then I'm sure we can ask him to come and talk to us.
All
right. Dr. Elena Wong. Thank you, Chairman. I would also like to raise that in the outstanding items, item 10, press freedom, and that is to be confirmed. It seems that it has been put into a freezer. Now, so much has happened recently, and people are very concerned about whether press freedom is being undermined in Hong Kong. Now, since from the incidents of Li Wailing, Calvin Lau, and then elected members are being taken away in certain meetings, in view of all these incidents, so the Chairman, can you please arrange as soon as possible for this item to be discussed in the panel? And also, the administration, can you tell us what measures you will put in place to ensure that there's press freedom and that journalists' rise to reporting at certain public gatherings will not be undermined? What kind of measures will the administration put in place so that the journalists will not be fearful in their press reporting work? Undersecretary, please take that up. Dr. N. Zhang? Chairman, everybody knows that the CPU's main task is to conduct research. If members do have questions on whether CPU is really undertaking research work, so perhaps, Chairman, you can make inquiries with the CPU. You can write to them to see if they are really doing such work and whether they can explain to us what they're doing. They can do it in writing, or they can actually appear before this panel to explain further. Now, if certain research is being undertaken and, well, they can explain to us what the benefits of these researches are. I believe that Mr. Xu has nothing to hide from us. So since members are so very concerned, well, let's try to do something, and I think we can accept some explanation in writing. Mr. Albert Ho, I originally didn't intend to speak, but once hearing what Dr. N. Zhang said, I think I must speak up. We're not concerned about the studies or research undertaken by the CPU. It's just that Mr. Xiu said that electrical members here are willingly accepting instructions from the liaison office. I think it's a structural problem. And the liaison office is very happy to give instructions to members, and I think this is very serious, because he is making serious allegations on Article 22 of the Basic Law. Of course, the government has its own stance and explanation. But before the government gives us a full explanation, I think Mr. Xiu should give a full account of what he meant when he made those remarks. It's not what as simple as what Dr. N. Chong said. Mr. Yip Kwok Him? On Mr. Xiu's remarks, I'm not very clear about all the reasons behind. But if members are concerned about the remarks, I think we can ask the relevant policy bureaus or departments to take it up and then discuss it at the relevant panel here in the electrical. Whether it is the CA panel, Mr. Lee said that we can cut across various policy areas. I don't think that's practical, because every panel has its own corresponding policy bureau. I think that the CPU is under the CS4A, so should we be writing, say, to the CS4A to see how she would make further explanations to members? I think that's a more proper way of doing it, rather than inviting Mr. Xiu to come and appear before this panel. Mr. Sin Chung Kai? Chairman, we're talking about whether the one country, two systems is being undermined. We are talking about constitutional reforms here, so I think this is a right panel to discuss that topic. On constitutional reforms, CS4A comes to this panel to make explanations, and she answered questions from the panel on that subject. So Mr. Xiu's remarks revealed that the central government is interfering with the one country, two systems. So I think we should not waste any more time. I think this panel deals with political reforms in Hong Kong, and I think this is the right forum to deal with it. Well, in that case, I'll talk to the secretary and also Mr. Xu Xinpo, and to reflect your views, and then I will respond to members to see how the arrangement should be like. All right, agenda item 3, and that is voter registration in 2014. 2 papers circulated to members. First one is CP2 1025/1314 (01), prepared by the administration. The other one is ZB (2) 1028/13-14 (03), that is compiled by the Secretariat. Perhaps I'll now ask the Mr. Lau Kong-Wah to brief us on the paper. Thank you, Chairman. The voter registration campaign started in the first half of March, so today we would like to brief members on our publicity work. The campaign will last till the end of June. Our highlights this year is really targeting the young people and also reminding electors that they should update their registration particulars. Perhaps like to defer to the Chief Electoral Officer to take us through the details of the campaign. We have Mr. Lee Pak Hong here with us, and also Mr. Shum Nam Leung. Mr. Lee, thank you, Chairman. We would like to update members on the publicity for the voter registration in 2014. This is an important civic responsibility or obligation. And the aim this year is to encourage eligible persons to register as voters and also to remind registered electors to update their personal particulars, especially when they have moved houses. In 2014, the deadline for application as registration is 16th of May 2014. They should register before that time, before they can be included in the final register and they can vote in the elections afterwards. For those who have registered already, they don't need to register again. But then if their personal particulars have changed, especially when the addresses have changed, they should notify the REO before the 29th of June so that their renewed particulars can be included in the provisional register. The campaign started last week, and we are doing publicity work through many channels, and we will be asking the public, more people, to come forward to register as electors. And we would also strengthen our publicity to encourage people to update their particulars if these have been changed. And they should be educated on the importance of keeping the data accurate. The particulars or the details of the work are outlined in paragraphs 5 and 6. There are 3 aspects of our work. As far as publicity is concerned, conventional media will be used, including APIs, radio broadcasts, newspaper advertisements, bus stop posters, and also other posters. The media covered a wide ranging so that we would be able to reach every stratum of the society. Second, we would be resorting to new media, including internet online. We would be advertising on online channels and also the online versions of newspapers and also mobile apps. We would resort to these direct channels to convey messages to the members of the public to strengthen our publicity effect. Third, targeted approach. We would also be setting up counters at the registration of persons ordinance to encourage people who have just turned 18 to register as electors. We would also be displaying posters at schools and universities. We will also be organizing visits to secondary schools. We would educate them on how to register as a voter. We would also be sending appeal letters to tenants of newly built housing estates to encourage them to register as electors. To encourage more young people to register, apart from the traditional media, the REO will also be putting in more resources to convey elector registration messages to young people. For the first time last year, we set up VR counters at the examination centers of the CSB. And we would also be joining large-scale programs, including sports events and music events, to encourage people to register as voters. We would set up counters and provide registration services. If these prove effective, these measures will continue in the next VR cycle. We have already earmarked $5.77 million to meet the expenses of such publicity measures. We would hope to encourage more people who have not yet registered as voters to come forward. And we would also drive home the message, the importance of updating personal particulars and the importance of keeping the register particulars accurate. So much for my presentation. 6 members have already raised their hands to speak. Mr. Yip Kin Yoon, Mr. Yip Kwok Kim, Dr. Priscilla Leung, Mr. Lee Chuk-yan, Mr. Sin Chung Kai, Mr. Sing Leung Sing. 5 minutes. Mr. Yip Kin Yoon first. Chairman. This paper is about the voter registration in 2014, the timetable, the expenses, and so on. I'd like to ask about the details of the voter registration. From the education sector, I want to talk about the electors in the tertiary education sector. I've mentioned that previously. Has there been any progress on that front? Now, if an elector wants to get registered, but then he doesn't have the right or he has been deprived of the right to register. No, so no matter how much publicity work you do, it's useless. In the 2012 CE election, our association has received many complaints. In 2011 CE election, many teachers said that they couldn't register as electors in the tertiary education sector. For those institutions listed under the CE election ordinance, they can register as voters. But then there are so many education institutions which are offering sub-degree programs. And in 2012, say for characters, and also Hong Kong and also Hong Kong Professional College, Yu Chung, and so on and so forth, faculty staff of these institutions can't register as electors. Would the situation be improved in the future? We raised the problem previously. Has any progress been made on that front? Is there a need to amend the ordinance? I'd have another question for the 8 UGC-funded institutions. Who are the people who have the right to register as electors? I've later found out that it's up to the institutions to decide. Now, the lecturers could not get registered. Only professors are entitled to register. But for some other institutions, the case is different. So the problem is that people belonging to the same grade in different institutions may be treated differently. Some can get registered and some cannot. So can some improvement be made? Should the legislation be amended? So please respond. Mr. Lee. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Yip Kin Yun raised about the question about education sector, and especially tertiary education sector. For these several sectors, the registration qualifications is clearly laid out in the ordinance. Now, for the incident in 2011, for the past decades, the problem arises because many institutions have set up community colleges and offering sub-degree programs. And the question is whether the teaching staff of those colleges can get registered in the education subsector. Now, we issued a paper explaining that our interpretation of the ordinance is that if a person in this kind of college teaches or conducts research on a full-time basis, or the administrative staff equivalent, and they are entitled to register as an elector under the ordinance.
The stipulations are very clear. As for the UGC-funded institutions and whether they know about the eligibility for voter registration, I can't see any problem. When they communicate with us, we do give them advice and let them know who are eligible for registration. They have a rank list and we would know. If there are problems, we can clarify that together with the CMAB and even with the DOJ, and also to see what advice can be given. Mr. Ip mentioned the names of certain colleges. Those people who act as administrators or lecturers and whether they are eligible, it really depends on the case and whether they are eligible under the Legislative Council ordinance. I can't give you a specific reply on this one. Mr. Chan K. I'd like to respond to Mr. Ip. In every election cycle, the CMAB will make technical amendments to the ordinances because functional constituencies may need to have some name change. There may be new organizations that have appeared. Say, for example, there may be public continuation education colleges which are not reflected in the present ordinance. If there is going to be a name change, which is technical, then we would do it 1 year before the election cycle. We would do the amendment work and update it at one go. At the last CE election, the schedule was tight, so we could not make it before the CE election. But next time in 2016, when we have the LegCo ordinance, in LegCo elections, we do not separate the tertiary education sector into two as in CE election, so it should be simpler. However, we would still do some amendments before that cycle so as to entrench the name change for certain organizations in order to deal with the uncertainties. We would be consulting members and also members of the public, and we will deal with that as part of the technical amendments. So that would be for the 2016 LegCo election. Yes, Mr. Ip Kwok Him. Thank you, Chairman. In this new round of registration, you are putting the emphasis on youth. I support it. You also mentioned in the paper that in 2013, when there were large-scale recruitment campaigns organized by the CSB, you would set up counters trying to register young people. Can I be told whether that was effective? You also said you would consider doing it again. Now, in this coming year, what kind of large-scale public or private large-scale activities there will be, and which will you target in order to secure the registration of young people and others? Cathay Pacific, MTRCL, may hold job fairs, and many people do approach them, so will you be looking at those? Secondly, in number 4, you particularly remind voters that if they receive REO's inquiry letters, they should reply before the deadline, or else they will lose their eligibility as electors. In the past few years, this was a major concern. The older voters or the careless ones may not attend to your letters, and when it comes to the time to vote, then they find out that they are no longer eligible. Will you tackle this point by doing more publicity, especially on electronic media? This will be for the benefit of the elderly. The elderly may not be in touch with a lot of the printed media. And Mr. Lee, is it you who would answer the questions? Yes, Chairman. The registration rate of the young has been a concern. The registration rate is going up. Say from 18 to 25 in 2009, the rate was 46%. And last year, it was approaching 60%, so it's on the rise. But compared to the overall registration rate of 73%, it is still on the low side. So we always like to target young people. Mr. Ip mentioned the large-scale activities, and in fact, we are just starting to try to contact young people through such activities. We are working like outreach social workers. In the past, we have been doing traditional publicity work. We also did it online, but there was some effect, but it was not very remarkable. So we like to contact young people through actual large-scale activities, and I mentioned we are going to visit secondary schools. Every year we make our rounds to 50 to 60 such schools, and we would be able to contact like 20,000 teachers and students, and we can issue voter registration messages to them direct. Last December, We set up a counter at a recruitment examination of the CSB. That was the first attempt. Was it effective? Well, it came back with a double-digit figure, and it was a starting point, let's say. And we understand departments will be holding large-scale activities like all Hong Kong Games or marathon for young people, etc. So wherever possible, where the physical setup allows us, we would like to do some registration work. And also, we will be contacting universities to see if they hold open days or other activities so we can do direct publicity. That is an ongoing kind of task, and experience will tell us whether this is effective. Even if it is not very effective, I would say that publicity may not yield immediate results, and as long as we can contact young people, we think it is worth our while. As for our inquiry letters, our starting point is always to update particulars. The removal of their eligibility from the register is not our target. So we also do a lot of publicity on the inquiry. And as Mr. Ip said, we should concentrate on radio and television publicity. And we have said that people who receive our inquiry letters should respond. In fact, we would also call these people up if they have other channels for communication with us, say by email or by fax. We will try our very best to contact them as they would like to be contacted, because we'd like to help them update their particulars. Next one, Ms. Priscilla Leung. Thank you, Chairman. We have mentioned this last time as well, and that is we'd like to prevent inadvertent commitment of offenses. Many people have said that you should do more sampling check. Say if there are 10 people with different surnames living in the same unit, then you should check it out. In fact, you should be able to detect these in your random checking, whether it was totally just inadvertent or there was vote rigging. If there was vote rigging, then we should combat it. And if it is just a careless mistake, and if it's really the case that different households live in the same unit, then perhaps you should ask us for more resources so you can do more checks. But here there is no mention of this in the paper. And that is whether you'd like to do more about this. That's the first point. Secondly, your paper, paragraph 26, you say that you would like to increase publicity of the interpretation of ordinarily resident in Hong Kong. But then somebody mentions the report in the newspaper today that you might encourage people to retire on the mainland. There may be a Hong Kong retirees village or elderly village on the mainland. And you also encourage young people to work north of the border. And also, even without your encouragement, many people are working there on the mainland, and there is cross-border marriage. And I have mentioned that there are famous people who live in Shenzhen, and they make multiple trips every day back and forth. So can you tell them more clearly whether they have the right to vote or not? And it is not just whether they are in Hong Kong, but you should be able to identify them. When they are on the mainland, you should try to search them out in more popular places for residents by Hong Kong people on the mainland, and you should explain to them if they continuously stay on the mainland, they may lose their eligibility. Now, but voting is an important right, and I think the paper has not answered the question. I will now give you all the time you need to let us know how you deal with this type of Hong Kong people, because even if they have retired to the mainland, they may not know that they might lose their eligibility. And also in para 30, you say they may move house, and you have quoted a case, and you say you would like to step up publicity, but it's still not clear. I think you should come clean with your policy. You should say that is not a problem. You can come and vote, but of course you should encourage people to change their addresses and notify you. But what happens if only your neighbors have moved and somebody has already lived in your house, and I don't know? Let us know about those situations. Mr. Lee, number one, checking work. Now, it is done in two ways. One, by random checking. We would look at the register and do some random checking, but another kind is targeted checking. We will verify information with departments, and if we find problematic addresses, we will do inquiry with the people concerned. We try to strike a balance. In 2012, that was the first time we rolled out a large-scale checking campaign, and some voters found that it was a little puzzling because they thought that we have somehow targeted them, and some people actually prefer not to become a voter. Of course, if we have suspicions, we can target those voters. But then I would prefer targeted checking as a result of cross-checking with other departments. This has been done all the time. We check with BD with regard to demolished buildings, and also with the HAB about village representative elections, and also with housing department about their household registration details. That has always been effective. As for the address problem, I think we have already discussed this in detail in previous panel meetings, and this is also clearly stipulated in the law that they have to be ordinarily resident in Hong Kong, and that they can provide a principal address for the purpose of registration. And the publicity is really to be targeted at Hong Kong residents in Hong Kong. But in some cases, some people have gone to the mainland for tourism, for studying, for seeking medical attention, etc. But as long as they are connected to Hong Kong, then to a certain extent they can comply with this condition of ordinary resident in Hong Kong, but they still need a principal address in Hong Kong. That is a stipulation in the law. We understand members' concerns, but the law is also clear. If there are cases to be clarified, we would be very happy to consult the CMAB and also the DOJ, and then we can give the advice. Number 3, Ms. Leung mentioned the case of Chong Wing Fai. That case brings out a fact, and that is according to election laws, if a voter has moved and has forgotten to declare his new address, then actually he should still be eligible. It is just that his constituency would be the one relating to the old address. This is what is required in the law, because we have to strike a balance. Now, that voter is still in Hong Kong and he is still eligible, so he should be having the right to vote in geographical constituency elections. But at the same time, we would like to update his address so he can vote in an appropriate constituency. The law affords the protection. Someone may move and the register may not have his new address in a timely manner. He is still eligible to vote.
Of course, if he first applies for registration, is providing a false address, then that case will be referred to the law enforcement body for follow-up. Mr. Lee CHAN, Chairman. The change of address, well, the new address should be provided to the authorities. But what about the FC? Now, if originally I belong to the education FC, then I want to switch to the district council 2 FC. So can that be done? Say if Mr. Albert Ho would wish to resign, and all the teachers would like to vote in the DC2 FC. Now, after the election is over, the teachers might choose to switch back to the education FC. Can that be done? What are the technical issues involved? All right, I'll try to answer that from a technical angle. That's allowed. For anyone who is not in the traditional FC constituency, he can register for the DC2 FC. Is there a time limit? we have a statutory timetable for registration. Should he do that within that time frame? Now, this is for this current round. Now, for the next round, say if it is 2015, then you can switch back to original FC. Is that right? All these switchings have to be done within the prescribed time frame. Is that right? Yes. Well, the VR cycle for the GC and the FC is the same. So if an elector is not registered in an FC, he can register by the 16th of May in the DC2 FC. The second example is if he is an elector in both, he can change his registration particulars, and the deadline for doing that is the 29th of June. Now, if the registration is successful, and he will be included in the final register to be published in July. And then if in the next VR cycle he wants to switch back again, then he can do so. But then that would only become valid when the final register is published in 2015. So we will look at the current year and ask the electors to do the registration within the current VR cycle. Mr. CHAN, the overriding, Mr. CHAN, rather, the REO needs time if by-elections are to be made. So if the date of a by-election is fixed, then we will resort to the updated final register. Now, so every time is the most updated register which will be used in a election. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, I would like to seek clarification from you. You have answered the question about people not ordinarily residing in Hong Kong. The government has all sorts of programs, mainland programs for people residing in the mainland, but they are truly Hong Kong citizens. But how can they maintain their voter eligibility without committing an offense? They may want to maintain their voter eligibility, say in the DC or local elections, without committing any offences under the law. Can you give us more details? Secondly, about updating addresses, I think you also mentioned about this last time. Is it true that whenever a building is demolished or a housing estate is demolished, you will automatically delete the residents in those buildings from your register because the buildings have been demolished, or some buildings may have been redeveloped. Say for a building which is taken over by the URA, is it right that you are updating the records without having to wait for the VR cycle, or is it done together with this VR cycle? Now, this time you are launching this massive VR registration campaign. But would you be pairing up with public utilities companies? Public utilities companies? Some people may purchase a new flat and they may have to apply for certain utilities. At that juncture, you may do VR. Would you be pairing up to work together with these public utilities companies? If you don't deal with their submissions when they move houses, then that would be a problem. So these are my several questions. Mr. Lee, for those people who have moved out of Hong Kong, their voter eligibility, we'll have to look at individual cases. We can't take a sweeping approach. Under the law that there is a requirement of ordinarily residing in Hong Kong. So whenever a case comes up, we have to look at why he is leaving Hong Kong, for how long he has been absent from Hong Kong, whether he still has an address in Hong Kong, whether he has connections still in Hong Kong. So these are the issues that we have to look at. So I am afraid that I can't give a generalized answer to Mr. Sin's question because the details of a case differ from one case to another. As for ordinarily resident in Hong Kong, there is a certain definition. This is a concept, and we have to look at why he is absent from Hong Kong and does he still maintain close connections with Hong Kong. So that's all I can say about this issue. And if there are cases, we have to seek advice from the DOJ. But can I interrupt? Well, please consider this. Can you consider some plans like safety harbors? Of course, you have to look at individual cases. For some, say, typical cases, you have already sought the advice from DOJ, and then you can lay out all your grounds in an FAQ. Now, for example, in the Guangdong scheme, people may stay for a longer period in the mainland, and their relatives may still stay in Hong Kong. These are the typical cases that you can elaborate on and give guidance to members of the public. Can you give us, say, a list of reasons or grounds where it will be where people on which people can base to maintain their voting eligibility? Can you do that? Please be brief in your answer. Well, we can consider that in greater detail. We have to look at whether we have accumulated sufficient similar cases. Now, unless the case is taken to a court and that there is a ruling, then we can't really say with authority on certain guidelines. Now, the second question about buildings to be demolished, public housing estates. Well, the approach is relatively simple because we work together with the housing department. Say if a PRH is going to be demolished, and the residents of that building will be reprovisioned or relocated to another estate, then we will get the information from the housing department and then update the particulars. Now, as for private buildings, we can obtain information from the buildings department on buildings which have been demolished. And then we will call up the landowners or the tenants or write to them and see if we can update their particulars. Now, if the residents don't respond to our inquiries, there is nothing much we can do. Now, we know that the buildings have been demolished, so we'll take out all the residents from the voter register. Now, the third question is about public utilities. Companies, they may possess personal particulars of their users. It has to do with personal data. Now, say if a member of the public applies for public utilities services, he may provide certain personal data, but that is really for the purpose of provision of those services. So under the laws, the personal data cannot be transferred to us for voter registration purpose unless the consent of the data subject has been obtained. Now, right now, we are trying to match data with a number of government departments. In the past, we explored whether we can match data with the Water Supplies Department or the Transport Department because they do own information on people's addresses. But after some discussions, we think it's not very cost-effective. Although they may possess a number of addresses, they may not be the correspondence address of the relevant individuals. So the information these departments possess may not be of good use to our VR exercises. Mr. Ng Sing. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to ask about the some financial arrangements. $5.77 million has been earmarked for the publicity campaign, and that is an increase of about 14%. From last year. What will it be used for? Where does this? How will the increase be used? Secondly, there have been scandals about vote rigging. in your VR registry exercise, would you be undertaking precautionary measures, or you find that the problem is not serious and no additional measures should be undertaken? Now, for newly registered electors, there may be an increase in the number year after year. Would you be providing some voting drills to these newly registered voters to familiarize them with the voting procedures? Mr. Lee. The budget is $5.77 million this year compared to last year. We will be using more electronic means and online publicity channels. For the first time, we will be taking out advertisements in mobile apps. We try to reach more young people. Secondly, we would also increase the manpower. We would try to do something at activities for young people. So these are the additional measures or initiatives that we will undertake. As for vote rigging, after 2011 and 2012, we have launched a number of launching measures, and these measures have already been regularized. So in a non-election VR cycle, the checking measures will cover around 130,000 people, and in election year the number will go up further. I think these measures do serve some purpose. Now, as for newly registered electors, starting 2012, we have conducted sample checks. In launching the checking measures in 2011, we discussed whether people should be asked to provide address proof. But after some deliberations, we wanted to strike a balance between encouraging people to register as electors and ensuring the accuracy of the data. We resorted to using more convenient measures. And if we noted some irregularities in the address, say if the address is incomplete, or the address is on the ground floor, or is like the address of a store, then we can check. We will check and ask the applicant to provide further information to ensure that it is his principal address. Next one, Ms. Sit-Ho. Chairman, this paper is about registration, and it says little about how to combat false registrations. This is an important issue. We should try to prevent vote rigging in direct elections, but for FC, I think vote rigging, which also curb vote rigging. And for the nominating committee, I think the same issues will arise. I don't want to talk about FC. The best solution is to abolish or scrap it altogether. But then the composition of the FC will also affect the nominating procedures of the nominating committee for future elections. Whether elections are credible depends on how much vote rigging is involved.
Controversies can come after voting takes place, so I really want to talk about FCs with you today. Apart from some sectors which register individuals, 230,000 FC votes will mean that only 70,000 people will be able to vote for 23 seats. And it is very easy to manipulate such people's eligibility. Say, for example, in the IT sector, you can accept members of professional bodies as voters. But these professional bodies may not be regulated by the law. How are they monitored? What kind of restrictions there are on them? Can they accept members indefinitely? So they can become voters in that sector. How can you put an end to that? And also there is a structural problem, say in the cultural sector. If you have accepted subventions of the Arts Development Council or the HAB, then through this bureaucratic process, you are keeping some people out. Now, how can you put an end to such deficiencies? Mr. Lee, FC voter registration is such that the eligibility is pegged to membership of companies or organizations. This is what the Legislative Council Ordinance says. If a person is with a company or a community organization, if that person is a member, or if he can vote in a general meeting, then he can also become an eligible voter in a certain FC. This is the legislative stipulation. In other words, you must be part or a member of the constituent organization. When we contact these organizations, we stress that they must supply accurate and updated information. And they have the obligation to act according to their memorandum of association and the laws. For example, they might have registered under the society's ordinance or the company's ordinance, and to a certain extent, they are regulated by these laws. And they have to act according to the law and the memorandum of association to do whatever is related to the membership system, that there should be a credible and open membership system. After the 2012 LC election, we were aware of members' views that the registration system might not be foolproof. Now, we always stress that we would depend on the enhancement of internal control or internal management of the organizations. Therefore, we have invited the ICAC to intervene into the matter and help us visit and provide advisory services to these organizations to remind them that, yes, it is your own organization, but then if in the process you provide inaccurate or leave out critical information so that the eligibility of voters is problematic, as a result, they are held responsible. Sorry, I have already given 2 minutes to Mr. Lee, and I'm just asking one question. If these organizations do not comply with the law, what is the penalty and how can the public monitor them? Mr. Lee, I was saying that internal governance is something for these organizations themselves. But if they provide false or misleading information according to the law, then they may have criminal liability, and the ICAC is helping to bring out that message. If they do not provide accurate information for our purpose of voter registration, then they would be held liable under the law. Well, of course, they don't want to tell you if they want to break the law, so how can the public monitor them? Mr. Lee, anything to add? Well, about monitoring, whether it be FCs or GCs, when it comes to voter registration, we would publish the provisional and also final registers. If it is found that a certain voter should not have been registered and a complaint is filed, we will refer that to the enforcement agencies, law enforcement agencies, for follow-up. Ms. Emily Lau? Chairman, I agree with Ms. Ho that the paper here, of course, says you encourage people to get registered, but then you also have to let us know how you combat vote rigging. You should say more on those, but then it is not exactly mentioned in your paper. But if we refer to the background brief prepared by the Secretariat, I'm sure you have also read it. It is said that after the DC election 2011, it was some massive reporting in the papers and there were many complaints. If you go to Annex 1 of the paper, just the police would show you that 3,000 people have been involved, and the ICAC, 8,000 people have been involved. But then only a dozen or a few dozens have been prosecuted. And the highest penalty given was an imprisonment of 12 months. Some people had only suspended sentences. All these had to do with DC elections. Can Mr. Lee tell us more about the complaints and prosecution with regard to FC and vis-a-vis voter registration, whether there have been cases? And also in 2012 LC election, you said that you did such a lot. You have removed 210,000 voters. But how many complaints have you received as a result? Is it really that you have overlooked 210,000 and so they have been detected when you did your job seriously, so they were removed? And are you going to do the same this time around? This is something very important. You have to issue a very clear message to society that there is zero tolerance with regard to vote rigging, especially tampering with the voter registers. The SCMA is telling the public that there will be 5 million people who will be eligible, but now there are only over 3 million. In other words, over 1 million have not registered, but you have not mentioned them. How are you going to seek them out so that they get registered as well? Mr. Lee. Chairman, 3 questions. Number 1, the ICAC and the police have followed up 11,000 cases, 3,000 by police, 8,000 by the ICAC. That was after the 2011 DC elections, including cases referred to them by us to the tune of 2,000. As far as we know, the police and the ICAC have already more or less completed their investigations. I think the ICAC only has a minority of cases which have not been completed. Ms. Lau, you can see that evidence has been shown to commit offences under the relevant laws, including ECICO. There have been 66 such cases and prosecution has been taken out on them, and 55 cases have seen convictions returned. What about the rest? Even if there is no evidence for follow-up by the enforcement agencies, we have asked them for all the information. And if these people have not been checked in our previous checking, then we would do inquiries into those. And together with this cycle, we have completed all inquiries, and in the end, a few thousand have been removed. Now, if you ask me for further details, it is because some of them did not respond to our inquiry, and a minority of cases have told us that they do not want to be voters anymore. So there are different reasons. As for the 210,000 who have been removed in 2012, why there was such a big number? The main reason was after the 2011 election, to respond to aspirations in society. We did a large-scale inquiry in 1 year, including checking all information about public housing residents involving 1.45 million people. And many people of those have not updated their addresses. Some of them have even moved out from PRH, so we could not identify them. That was some thorough checking, and that is why we found that 210,000 of voters did not live in the addresses they gave us. Well, it did not mean necessarily that they gave us a false address in the beginning, but in most of the cases, they just did not declare to us their updated address. So we checked them out. Some of them could not provide the address proof. Well, at that time, we were very strict. We had to check for total accuracy of information before registration was revived, and that is why such a big number was removed. After that, we already did the publicity that even if you were removed in that year, please come back with your updated address and you would be registered again. About 8,000 to 9,000 have been re-registered. It's not a big number, but as to why the others have not come forward for registration, we don't know. We'll continue with the publicity, whether they have been registered and removed or they have never registered. We would welcome them to come forward to be voters. This has always been our target. Well, Chairman, many people have not come back for registration because they should have been identified long ago. Now, maybe you should not do such thorough checking every year, but maybe biannually, so that you keep your registers intact. Yes, Chairman. In non-election year, we would adjust the level of work downwards because there is no major election and the necessity will not be that great. And we don't want to disturb the public. But in election years, we will strengthen or step up our efforts. And therefore, next year, in November, we are going to have DC elections. And in the 2015 cycle, we are going to reinstate that large-scale checking. That's important. And what about the 1 million odd voters who have not registered? Please be brief. According to our information, those who are eligible and have registered, number 4.4 million. So the registration rate is 73%. I would say there would be 1 million who have not registered. We'll continue to do our regular and continuous publicity. Next one, Ms. Chen Yun Han. Thank you, Chairman. I think this paper is full of cliches. The thing is, you have not dealt with the problems. Mr. Lee, in your para 4, of course we support you. You have mentioned those important points there, but then objectively there are many loopholes. This is not just identified last time or this time, but in fact they have appeared every time. Voters would ask me and they would pursue me for answers. They would say they have moved house and they have notified you. How come the registration is not available to them? And then some other people, elderly people may move with their children, and people have updated their addresses with you, but then they have not been registered. So is this administrative negligence, or is it that you lack manpower? My staff have talked to you on their behalf, and still you have not rectified many of those cases. Now, you talked about 4 points. In that campaign, I'd like to know whether administratively you have enough manpower, or is it there is any administrative problem? Mr. Lee, Chairman. The entire process is very stringent, whether we are dealing with new registrations or updating of address cases. I won't rule out that we might have been negligent, but if a voter has indeed moved and he has updated his address with us, after the process is over, we would actually send a letter to inform him of the same. As I said, every year we issue provisional registers. The arrangement is that people have to go to HAD to be able to read the provisional registers, but of course that is not very convenient. If they can know the information in the provisional register, if he doesn't find himself there, then he can provide the latest information so that in the final register, the latest information is reflected. As I said at the last panel meeting, we are developing an online system. If you have put in a request to update your address, you can see what has been done about it online. If he finds a mistake, then he can contact the REO, and if he sees that no updating has been done, then he can contact us again to see whether there is a problem with his case. I hope that can help members of the public and voters. So if voters submit applications, and if he wants to know whether it has been completed and because no reply has been received from the REO, then later on he can visit our website. Well, you seem to let us know that the system is perfect, but that is not the case. I am in contact with a lot of grassroots, especially the elderly. They can't go online. They don't know what is a provisional register. They would just lodge a complaint and nobody answers them, and then they would be asking people on the streets. And really a few such voters came to ask me, why is it that they were not eligible? Well, why don't you simplify matters? If it is a PR, a Hong Kong PR, and he has just moved house, then just allow them to cast the vote. Now, administratively, that is not possible, and it's very, very saddening. There is this old man in Tung Tau Chin. He comes to me and asks me the same question every time he sees me. There are many such cases. And basically, you have a list for us, for candidates to make home visits. I think it should be accurate, right? But no, it is not exactly accurate, I can tell you. We sometimes can't find the voters, even if we go to those addresses. So do you check those lists at all, Mr. Lee?
For information on the voter register, we have emphasized that it should be as accurate as possible. So that's why we launched a host of checking measures in 2011 to update the information, and we tried every means to find or identify the elector to update the records. And if that can't be done, we will go through the statutory processes, and we will continue doing so. Well, in the interest of time, let me raise this. Say, for a big family with over a dozen family members, that's a very suspicious case. I think you are short of manpower and you can't follow up those suspected cases properly. These are old problems, and I hope that next year the DC election is going to be held. These sort of problems won't arise again. I want to remind the government, please try to plug the loopholes as much as possible. Try to make inquiries with, say, households with a large number of family members, people who live in the same place with different surnames. All these cases are dubious. So please try to do as much as possible to tackle these problems. Now, in labor union elections, we do all sorts of safeguarding measures as well. So I think you are not doing a proper job probably because you are short of manpower and you are not careful enough and so on. These are old problems that you should face up to. Now, there is a small flat, say 500 square feet, and there lives a dozen or so family members. It's all very strange. Well, you're repeating yourself, Ms. Chan. Now, 3 more members would like to speak. The next agenda item, or the 4th agenda item, is the work report of the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data. He should have started reporting or briefing us at 3:30, and it's getting too late, so I would not allow a second round. Okay, Mr. Wong Chi-Chun, Wong Yok-man, and Paul Chair, and Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. 4 members, please be brief. There will not be a second round. Mr. Raymond Chan, my first question has to do with paragraph 4D about REO's inquiry letters. REO sends inquiry letters. Is there a time frame to do that? Are they doing it continuously, or is there a certain time period where they would do, in which they would do it? Is it going to be tying in with the current VR cycle and the inquirer? The people should provide the required information by the prescribed deadline. What is this deadline? Now, if I disregard your prescribed deadline and I register again or afresh in your VR cycle, does it mean that I can ignore your inquiry letter? Or is it the case that I would be prohibited from registering again if I disregard your inquiring letter? That is the first question. My second question has to do with publicity among young people. In your paper, you said that you will be displaying posters at universities. Well, I think this is a kind of passive publicity measure. When I was studying primary school, teachers actually handed out registration forms, and if we handed back the form, then we would be given a souvenir, like a ruler or what. And I think some political parties are also doing that now. So can the government consider that as well? Can you work together with universities, and they can take the initiative to do work for you by employing tactics that I mentioned? You don't have to wait, say, for open days of universities that may, say, happen 2 times or thrice every year. So can you work together with university students? Now, as for inquiry letters, this is an ongoing exercise, and that will be done for every cycle. Prescribed deadline. We don't send the letters at one go. For some measures, the deadline may be earlier. For some others, that will be later. So usually we give 2 weeks' time for the voters to respond. We may send out letters at different periods in a year. And the deadline is the 16th of May. So by the end of April, we would we have sent out all the inquiry letters. So that's required by the law, and that's done for every VR cycle. Now, as for re-registration, that can be allowed. We will have to we will look at why we are writing inquiring letters, and for the new registration, we will check it against the inquiry letters. Why are we sending out these inquiry letters? And then we'll check it against the new registration form. Second, thank you, Mr. Chan, for your inquiry. For primary school students, we are doing some work among them as well. We have a election resource center, and we arrange visits for primary school students on a regular basis, and we play games with them, educating them on how to vote. That's a long-term initiative. We will educate primary school students, secondary school students to enhance their awareness on election. Can we work together with young people and university students? This is quite an innovative idea. We will try to see if we can identify such volunteers. We do actually go to universities to work together with them to publicize the electoral matters among university students. I think the registration rate for among university students is relatively low, and we want to do more, definitely, on that front. Mr. Raymond Wang, the VR cycle, there is this VR cycle every year, so we are not paying enough attention to such a matter, hence the very serious vote rigging problem in 2011 DC elections. And the government is not very strict on your investigation work. When the government talks about the VR cycle, you only focus on the publicity work, and you didn't say anything about the vote rigging problem. This panel mentioned many times that precautionary measures to be taken to curb vote rigging. That should not be limited to the election year, but for non-election year, those measures should also be undertaken. But I don't think you are doing that. I hope that the REO must provide every year statistics on your checking measures. I am also worried about the vacuum period. Now, after the registration deadline, people who may not have turned 18, what are their voting eligibility? Sometimes, well, so for some people, they will turn, say, 18 in September 2012, but then they didn't register previously, and there is a long vacuum period, and they didn't have the right to vote in the 2012 elections. The longer the vacuum period, the people are deprived of the right to vote. So that may go against Article 26 of the Basic Law. Are there sufficient grounds for this vacuum period? No. People may be given differential treatment under the law. Well, that is allowed only when there are sufficient grounds. There is this kind of statement or stipulation in the law. The vacuum period is there just to facilitate administrative convenience. There may not be sufficient grounds. Now, for a vacuum period which lasts longer than 3 months, that's not acceptable to me. Long here is here. Say the court, after judicial review, reinstated the voting eligibility of the inmates, and then legislation had to be amended to facilitate that as well. So can you consider giving limited voter eligibility, those who are going to turn 18 when the elections are held? If, say, some checking work at the polling stations, then they will be allowed to vote. I think the additional administrative costs will be very minimal. I think the government should consider that. Wow, long hair, you may ask some young people to seek a judicial review of the present arrangement. Mr. Lee, about this vacuum period, let me tell you the present arrangement. Under the law, when he is 18, when the final register is published, the person can actually make an application to register as a voter. In 2012, the publication of the final register was on the 25th of July, and then the electoral elections were held in September. So the vacuum period lasted only for 2 months. Now, if he couldn't catch the 2012 elections, he could register in the 2013 VR cycle. But the problem is that he didn't have the right to vote. And he had to wait for 4 years before he could vote. Or he could vote in the 2015 elections, and that means 3 years. Well, if there are by-elections in between, of course he can also vote. Well, I think you are being unreasonable in saying that. The young people have to are made to wait for several years. I think there is discrimination against the young people by elections. So I think this is nonsensical. Well, even if you get registered after 3 months after the election, you can only vote in 2016. Mr. Paul Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The vacuum period. We talk about automatic VR. Last time we mentioned that, and the government said that it would review that issue at an appropriate time. Now, would the government consider automatic VR? If, say, we allow people to automatically register as voters so long as they have an identity card, isn't that feasible? What are the constraints if we do that? Now, in paragraph 15 and 16 of the electoral paper, the Secretary's background brief, there is a 6-month bar for prosecution under the ECICO. The government says that the transferring the offences under, well, in paragraph 16, the offences under the EAC ordinance and the ECICO, the penalties differ a lot. They don't want to merge the two together because they are worried that there will be unbalance. In terms of the workload, the police and the ICAC will be sort of in an unbalanced situation. In Appendix 1 and 2 of the letter sent to us, in Annex 1, the number of investigation cases, or Annex 2, the sentences handed down. After an appeal, well, the sentences last from 2 to 4 months jail or imprisonment, and for some of the cases there, it has been suspended. And actually, the normal or the usual sentencing is 3 to 4 months. And no sentencing is handed down is over 12 months imprisonment. That's the first question. In Annex 1, or rather Annex 2, the number of inquiries. For those where the addresses cannot be verified and the poll cards have been undelivered, it means that all the registration should be deleted.
You have only issued over 20,000 inquiry letters. That's a very small proportion. Why? And also number 5, demolished buildings. They are gone. Why? You only tackle 406 out of 658. What are the reasons? Under Secretary? Chairman, if it is a policy issue, let me take it up. Automatic registration. We have studied that proposal. However, we have a voluntary registration system now, and it covers over 70% of voters acting voluntarily. If you mandate it on that basis, it might not be liked by the citizens. No, it is not mandatory. It means automatic. It is not mandatory. I get it. Yeah, I understand. But to a certain extent, that is something that is imposed, there may be some people who don't want to be registered, no matter how you do it. And once you launch that kind of measure, you have to think about penalties, and this will become complicated. We need to act with caution, therefore, on this one. No, I'm only talking about right, not responsibility. I'm not asking everybody to vote like in Australia. I'm just saying that once people have an ID, they should be eligible for voting. It's simple. You don't need to get registered, so you won't forget getting registered. Mr. Chang, let me add to what the Undersecretary said about automatic registration. We are studying it internally, but we have to consider these issues. If it is automatic registration, then when the voter register is published and inspected by the public, it would mean that we open up and publicize all the addresses of all people in Hong Kong. Now there is a voluntary registration system. People can opt out. But if it is automatic, we really need to have that opt-out system. Right now, it is voluntary. But some people wouldn't like to come forward because the registers are made public. You have to consider that point. And also, the information may not be sufficiently correct and accurate, and that might have an impact on the constituencies. So technically, we have to consider this as well. Another question has to do with penalties. In previous panel meetings, members have supported our proposal to remove the time bar. We would amend the ordinance by way of miscellaneous amendments, and I'm sure we can tackle that within the legislative year. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong? The problem is, if there is a window period, but given advance in technology, I think you can re-register it. I understand there is a window period, but a voter has registered, and then the computer may set a clock or timer so that that voter can become eligible at a certain or on a certain date. You can do that. If your target or objective is, oh, look, this is too troublesome, I don't want to do it, I'm sure you would lose your case at the court. Do you want to face another judicial review? You really have to think about this. If voting right is something that cannot be deprived of anybody, then you have to be reasonable and proportional when you want to deprive that right. If you can't think this through, I'll meet you at court. That's very troublesome. Secondly, there's a problem with the voting system. Hong Kong people always move house. Well, that happens in all big cities in the world. Hong Kong is a metropolis, and it's common for people to move house. Well, if you can equate the votes somehow, then it's all right. Say, if I live in To Kwa Wan, I move to Sheung Sha Wan, and I forget about updating the address. Now, it doesn't matter in an LC election, because there will be a natural interflow of population. Some people might have registered in Cheung Sha Wan, and they might not want to change their address even if they have moved out of Cheung Sha Wan. So your reason is not very appropriate. I just want my voting right. Let me exercise it. Don't deprive me of it just because I have moved house. But DCs tackle smaller constituencies, and there may be a problem. But you have to think about it, because voting right is all that matters. There will be reforms in Hong Kong in future. There may be territory-wide elections because there will be universal suffrage. You should not just think about the present system. There could be just one list of LegCo members, and everybody can vote on the same list. And the list may include myself. And therefore, you have to be forward-looking in your thinking. And there is another point. If later on everybody can vote like what Mr. Chris Patton proposed, in other words, people do not vote as legal entities or body corporates, then you have to think about this. And I'd like to go back to that window period. And also, should people be deprived of their voting rights just because they did not update their addresses? You should really consider it. The thing is, there is nothing to lose. Undersecretary, you have to answer this. In fact, you do not stand to lose as long as you are not talking about small constituencies in DC elections, because people just move around and they are still in Hong Kong. Now, if that's the case, you should delineate constituency boundaries in a more proportionate manner. And that can help you solve the problem. I think that is the direction for your reform. In other words, no matter where people live, the final result should be more or less the same. Undersecretary. Mr. Leung made two proposals. Number one, demarcation of election constituency boundaries. Whenever there is a change, we would come here to consult members every time. Secondly, it's just not the window period. Window period is not just mentioned by Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. I think we can go back and look at it again, even if it is not 3 months, but just over a month. To young people, they have reached 18, and yet they are not given the opportunity. They, of course, wouldn't like to have this window period. Let us go back and study the technical issues and whether other issues are involved. Let us come back and report to you. Right. Because of time constraint, Chairman, he did not answer my question. I don't argue with you on the DC constituencies, but with regard to LCGC elections, there are just 5 constituencies. Many of my voters are like that. They move out from Sha Tin. And some have moved in, and they might have moved to Tseung Kwan O, but they have not updated their addresses, so I stand to win, you know. I'd like you to answer that question. You don't stand to lose at all because people flow naturally amongst the 5 big constituencies. Okay, the next item, item 4, briefing by the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data. Let us invite the next team to come in. Commissioner, we welcome Mr. Alan Chang, the Privacy Commissioner, for attending this meeting. Together with him, we have Ms. Brenda Kwok, Chief Legal Counsel, and also Mr. Gordon Leung, Deputy Secretary for CMAB. There was a very heated discussion on the last item, and I think we have overrun by about 40 minutes. Therefore, Commissioner, can you shorten your presentation so there will be more time for members to ask questions? Our meeting should end as scheduled at 4:30. Commissioner, please start. Okay, I will be as brief as possible. We have a very brief PowerPoint presentation to let you know our work in 2013. What I'd like to say is that in 2013, our workload has increased by a wide margin. If you look at the number of complaints, it numbers over 24,000, which is the highest recorded so far. Most of the inquiries in 2013 had to do with the 1st of April in 2013, where the personal data in direct marketing amendments in the law have kicked in, and therefore there were many inquiries in this aspect, taking up 55% of inquiries. Again, complaints also topped the list, altogether 1,792. A rise of 48% compared to the last year, or 2012. If you look at the figures, you will see that 78% had to do with the private sector. Amongst the private sector, if we'd like to subdivide them, financial sector, most of the complaints had to do with them. And the second one, in terms of numbers, telecommunications, and then property management. With regard to direct marketing, there have been the most number of complaints, or a rise of 300% compared to 2012. It is because on the 1st of April, there was the amendment ordinance making available measures to control direct marketing. Of course, people were not very conversant with the law, so there were many complaints and inquiries on direct marketing. There was this scenario as well, where in terms of ICT, information and communications technologies, there have been more complaints. Altogether in 2013, there were 93, compared with 50 in 2012. There were 45 relating to social websites, and with regard to mobile apps, 22, and all these represent an increase over 2012. We, of course, act on the complaints, but then we also initiate investigations on the basis of information made public or made available by the media. There was 208 such investigations compared to 116 in 2012. 19 of them have received formal investigations. Because of the popularization of mobile apps, we took the initiative to check Hong Kong mobile apps. We reviewed 60 such apps to look at the privacy policy included in them, and we had to follow up on these cases. We also random checked, and we found that over 90% did not give certain introduction on what the data gathered would be used for. And in fact, many people do not have a high awareness about this. We found that over 20% of the people who were checked in 2012 would in fact look at the privacy statement in order to know what kind of data had been used and for what purpose. Next, I'd like to talk about prosecution. We would take enforcement actions, and we would find some criminal cases which have been referred to the police. We also have issued many investigation reports, and in 2013, 6 of them. And we have broken records one after another. In 2013, on the 1st of April, we rolled out the new legal assistance scheme. We received 16 applications. 1 has been granted assistance. Half of those are still being vetted.
Next, I would like to talk about the Data User Returns Scheme, DURS, which was also mentioned here at this panel last year. Originally, we planned to launch the scheme among government and public bodies, banking, telecommunication, and insurance sectors. So we conducted a consultation in 2011, but then the sectors were not enthusiastic about this scheme. And at the same time, at the EU, they have accumulated over 10 years' experience in launching this scheme. So they think that there should be a review. And so we put this scheme on hold for the time being. And in the interim period, we launched a privacy management program, which can serve as a substitute to enhance privacy protection. We target the major corporations. And the thinking behind is that major corporations should adopt such a program and make it part of the corporate governance system. And the relevant policies and procedures should be put in place to protect data privacy. So in the past year, we launched the scheme among the major sectors, and last month we've achieved very good progress, and the SRG has undertaken that all government policy bureaus and departments will roll out the scheme, and in the insurance sectors, 25 companies, telecom sector 9 companies, and 5 other companies, CLP, Town Gas, Hong Kong Electric, Hospital Authority, and Octopus Holdings, have also promised to roll out the program. Now, for the Hong Kong Association of Banks, it also said that it would support the scheme, and the individual member banks would implement the principles behind the program based on their own situation. Now, I want to talk about the Section 33, which has not yet been brought into force. Now, the ordinance was enacted in 1996, and for this particular section, it has not been brought into force yet. This provides that a stringent regulation of transfer of data outside Hong Kong. It expressly prohibits all transfers of personal data except for 2 circumstances. First, the place is specified by the Commissioner as one which has a force, a data protection law which is substantially similar to or serves the same purpose as our ordinance. A white list should be drawn up. So the data should be transferred only to jurisdictions under the white list. The second is that the data user has taken all reasonable precautions and exercised all due diligence to ensure that the data will not be handled in a manner tantamount to a contravention of a requirement under the ordinance. But to date, that section has not been brought into force yet. We have actually made a plan in the past year. We have appointed a consultant which has compiled a report for us, and we have drawn up a list of 55 jurisdictions, and we think that we will look at their data protection level, how it compares to Hong Kong, and for some of the places in the list, they are found to be up to the standard, and we can transfer data to these jurisdictions. So the report has been submitted to the Bureau, and there are 2 unfinished tasks. And first, it has to do with the guidelines. If we are to implement that, we should give concrete or specific guidelines for compliance with the sectors, and we're still drafting that guideline. Now, also, under the ordinance, the data user, by drawing up a contract, can require their overseas partners to give adequate protection to the data to be transferred outside of Hong Kong. So for these contract, we will come up with a sample for reference by data users if one day Section 33 is brought into force. Even if the Section 33 has not been brought into force, major corporations which attach importance to data protection can make use of that sample contract. For the last 2 slides, these are about our publicity and public education work. Now, from this table, you can tell that in terms of number, the kind of activities that have been undertaken, well, you can tell from the figures that we have enhanced and boosted our work in spite of our very limited resources. We are doing very good work on that front. Now, in the interest of time, I think I'll stop here and I'll allow more time for members to raise questions. Thank you, Chairman. 5 members have raised their hands. Mr. Raymond Wong, Stephen Ho, Emily Lau, Yu Si Wing, and Wong Ting Kwong. Or rather, Mr. Albert Ho. Now, the meeting time will end at 4:30, and I have some other appointment at 4:30 p.m. Can the deputy chairman chair the meeting when I leave? Yes. I have a complaint to deal with at 4:30, but I'm willing to take over the chair for you. Five minutes each, then that will be up to 4:45. So, Vice Chair, can you take over the chair from me? Thank you. First, Mr. Raymond Wong. I will be very brief. In paragraph 11, it is mentioned that 40 complaint cases are related to the unwanted disclosure of individuals' personal data on social networking sites, and 12 concerned the receipt of unsolicited DM messages through WhatsApp. You said that these cases are difficult to follow up. Are you just ignoring them, or trying to think of measures to try to follow up? You can't just say that you couldn't follow up. You must have some measures, and you should not ignore them because they're difficult to follow up. Another question has to do with paragraph 12. It says that the PCBD office has received 61 known data breach incidents affecting 90,000 individuals. How many of them are related to leakage of information from public hospitals? Because these incidents are very frequent, because the pharmacist of the QMH has lost the USB containing patients' data. I think these kind of incidents is so very frequent. So have you thought about how to educate public hospitals on such incidents or safeguarding measures? Now, in paragraph 14, it says that the PCBD office has made a survey of 60 smartphone apps, and only 60% of the apps provided privacy policy statements, and most of them did not explain what smartphone data they would access and the purposes for the access. Now, under the ordinance, is it true that the WhatsApp providers do not have the responsibility to provide such a statement? If that is the case, I think the law has to be amended to require such an explanation be made. I think this is an important part of data privacy protection. Now, on Section 33, is from 1995 up to now, not yet brought into force. It has to do with a transfer of personal data outside of Hong Kong. And you said that regulation should be strict, and then you say that there are two requirements, but it seems that the regulations exist in name only. And you said that you need further to study the subject. Well, it's unacceptable that is not been brought into force from 1995 up to now. Can you tell us when it will be brought into force? How much more time will the study going to last, Commissioner? How much longer will the study take, or rather? First, about social network sites. For every complaint, we will carry out in-depth investigation, and we will follow up duly. And if needed be, we will issue an enforcement notice to ask people to remedy the situation. Now, for the cases which could not be followed up, the complainant could not provide us with information on who has done such acts, who put the messages on the websites. And the complainant could not provide us with information for us to follow up on. So these are the cases which could not be followed up. Well, I think you have got the direction wrong here. If there are many of such cases, well, you should not be really looking at the individual cases, but rather the overall picture. If this is a general phenomenon, you should formulate measures to tackle the problem. I'm not saying that you should tackle tackle the individual complaint. Well, I fully agree with you. Prevention is always better than cure. So in terms of publicity and public education, we spend no effort in educating on the net website users how to protect their own privacy. For example, among students, university students, and workers, we provide free seminars to them on our website and on the Facebook and YouTube sites. We launched a lot of materials to teach them how to protect their own personal data privacy, i.e., not to put personal data on the website unnecessarily. That's the best way to protect your own personal data privacy. In the interest of time, the next one, please. Mr. Albert Ho. I find it very regrettable that Section 33 has not yet been brought into force. A large number of banks, insurance companies, and telecommunication companies are transferring a large volume of their clients' personal data, bring it overseas to be stored in an overseas jurisdiction. And a lot of backup offices actually located outside of Hong Kong. So a lot of data has been transferred outside of Hong Kong. Now, in many of these jurisdictions, there are no equivalent data protection laws. Say, on the mainland in 2004, in Yahoo incident, the National Security Department said that I needed such information, and that Yahoo was made to hand out all the information. And this led to the journalist by the name of Sito being jailed for 10 years. He has just been released from jail. And that also triggers a lot of litigations overseas, and the Yahoo was made to give out a lot of compensation as a result. Well, the information, including the IP address, the operation time, and so on, these information has all been transferred out of Hong Kong, say, to the mainland. And many companies are transferring data outside of Hong Kong. I think the white list is totally useless. In any case, I think the Section 33 should be brought into force as soon as possible. Please give us a timetable. Second, is the white list a useful list? Say, even if there is a data protection law in that place, then what about its enforcement action? Or is there any other overriding laws which override the data protection laws? How are you going to deal with situations like those? So this is a major loophole, and you don't have any clue as to how many corporations and how much data has been transferred outside of Hong Kong to their logistics bases overseas. And this sort of data is subject to all kinds of risks, Commissioner. Under the existing ordinance, there are data protection principles governing the use of personal data, and that covers data transferred outside of Hong Kong. It's not the case that we don't have any protection at all. Now, in slide 29, we said that data protection 2.3 and data protection principle 4.2 govern such data.
However, we don't think that's comprehensive or adequate. Why? Because I was referring to this slide, and it only talked about regulation in a certain respect. If a principle is flouted, it still doesn't constitute an offense. So we believe there is not the strictest kind of regulation. Section 33 will be the final solution for enhancing regulation. Our stance is that we agree we should implement Section 33 ASAP. Do you have a timetable? We have to wait for the administration to come up with a timetable. We can only react. We have made the whitelist. That is a first step. And as I said, within half a year, we are going to create a model contract. Whether or not there is a whitelist, organizations can make use of the model contract. Okay, can I just interject? later on, if there is the law, those who are not on the whitelist should not be transferred any information or data. Is that right? Chairman, apart from the whitelist, which would allow the transfer of information, well, there can be other ways to do it, contractual regulation. Well, that would not be adequate, said Mr. Ho. But you also need, for example, the consent of the data subject. And in certain circumstances, organization can transfer data out of Hong Kong. We have created the whitelist. Within half a year, we are going to create the first draft of the model contract, but the timetable has to be formulated by the administration. This is not something I can answer. We have started late on this item. Mr. Commissioner, can you stay until 5 or 15 to 5? Okay. Ms. Emily Lau, Chairman. Section 33 has not been implemented. But then there is another one which has not been implemented but which is more important. And that is that this law does not regulate state organs. In Hong Kong, we used to have Xinhua News Agency. Now we have Liaison Office and others. This is not something for the Commissioner because he can do nothing about these organs. But since you are concerned about Section 33, you should also be concerned about agencies collecting personal data, but those are not under your control. They are collecting data, but they are not under your regulation. Maybe the data are transferred back to the mainland. So I don't get it. The central authorities have said that this is a complicated issue. But, Chairman, can I ask the clerk to exert pressure on the administration to let us have the information? And Mr. Commissioner, what kind of risks can you see happening because these organizations are collecting data, yet they are not under your regulation? And then the investigation reports, I think they should be something good, but you have only completed 6. And with regard to complaints and inquiries, a lot have been received. Well, we should not be asking whether you have enough money, but let us do ask you that question. Your predecessor said that he had to rely on personal connection in order to get things done. But do you have enough money and people doing the work? Because you have to defend our basic rights. In the paper, you need to streamline your work procedure and enhance productivity and efficiency. That is something good. But does it mean that you do not have enough manpower, so you are delaying your work? Commissioner. Chairman, my jurisdiction is provided for in the law. Section 8 of the law states the scope of my work. Please speak into the mic, please, so we can hear you. You can suppress the microphone. Section 8 of the law stipulates my jurisdiction as the Commissioner. If an organization collects data, but if it is not defined in the law as a data collector, then I cannot enforce the law on that organization. That is very clear. But as to what the administration can do, the administration can talk about its own stance. Investigation reports, just 6. Yes, it's a small number. Of course, the more the merrier. However, we are selective. We do such investigation reports when there is serious flouting of the law, say if it involves a big number of people, and if the breach is going to be of exemplary value, then we will use it and write an investigation report, because that's a very labor-intensive kind of work, and we must be selective. But if you look at the figures, we are already issuing many more reports. I assumed office in 2011. At that time, the figure stood at 10, but now the figure has risen to 37. In other words, we have been issuing many more investigation reports. Given enough resources, we'd like to do more. Again, this is a platitude. Frankly speaking, we do not have enough. As I said, in the number of just 4 years, complaint cases have doubled. Of course, we thank the administration for increasing our resources, but it is not catching up. with our workload. Chairman, do you have any work targets? Are you reaching them? Say within how much time you can complete the complaint, etc. Please be brief because 3 members are waiting to ask questions. The answer is in 2013, we did not reach 1 work target only. And that is in terms of telephone inquiries. One of the work targets is that if people cannot dial in, there will be recording and we have to reply within 2 days. But we could not reach the 98% target because in May and April, we received so many inquiries on direct marketing amendments. We received 2.5 times more complaints, inquiries, and we had to reply within 4 to 5 days. But that was exceptional. We could reach all other work targets, and we actually exceeded those. We are enhancing efficiency. Mr. Yu Si-wing, there were over 20,000 inquiries, an increase of 27%, and complaints have jumped by 48%. But if you look at prosecution, in para 19, there were no convictions in 2013. This is so strange. Why is it that there were so many inquiries and complaints and yet there was no conviction? I'd like to ask about the last 3 years. Has there been any conviction in the last 3 years? And why was there 0 conviction in 2013? Because if you do not convict people, you are a toothless tiger. You do a lot, but then there has been no prosecution, and even if there was prosecution, there was no conviction. What is your stance on that one? Commissioner, first of all, I'd like to stress we are an independent statutory body. We are not a government department. That is clear in the ordinance. But all along, we have been asking for criminal investigation and also conviction powers, but we failed in the last amendment exercise. We still have to rely on the police to follow up on suspected breaches of the ordinance where criminal liability may be concerned. You can see we have referred more cases to the police in 2013. After the amendment to the ordinance, there is a higher penalty, and therefore there have been more referrals, especially with regard to prosecution on direct marketing on the basis of data protection. Well, but since that was something new, there was some teething period, and therefore the police had to do follow-up after referral is done, and in certain cases we had to refer cases to the DOJ to consider prosecution, and that is why in 2013 there has been no prosecution. We are not happy with the situation at all. We'd like to see some improvements. We have put in so much effort to work on the amendment ordinance, and we'd like really to bring in a deterrent after that. But in the end, if there is 0 prosecution, we don't think it is an ideal situation. Therefore, in the last 2 months, I contacted the DOJ, and my staff have been in contact with the police to reflect our wish that there will be improvements. I hope that in future, the 2 departments can complement our work, and maybe they can conduct briefings for us to impart knowledge and techniques to us. And perhaps we can do better vis-a-vis the referral of information, so in the end we can secure prosecution after criminal investigation. What about prosecution in the last 3 years? Commissioner. Slide 21. Conviction and prosecution. Only referral figures are there. Prosecution figures are not there. But prosecution is meaningful only when there is a conviction. Slide 21. In 2010, 0 conviction. 2011, 4 convictions. I remember in 2011, I had meetings with the DOJ and the police to reflect our worries about 0 conviction. And then in 2011, there was more tacit understanding and work was smoother. So there was an increase from 0 to 4. In 2012, 2 convictions. You can see the results. But in 2013, the result has not been satisfactory. But as I said, I will actively pursue the matter with the 2 departments, and hopefully we can secure better results in the days to come. We only have 3 minutes before 4:45, but 2 members are waiting to ask questions. Commissioner, can you stay longer? And if you can stay, we can give 4 minutes to each member so it is fair. Hon Kenneth. In 2013, there have been most complaints on direct marketing. I remember when we wanted to regulate direct marketing, especially face-to-face direct marketing, I said that we should control it as well. But unfortunately, my amendment was vetoed. I think you have this experience. When you have meetings here at LegCo, you will also receive cold calls. Chairman, we were in Europe for a study tour. When we were in the UK for the second day, it was at 4 a.m. and I received cold calls from 2 banks. I was still under the effect of jet lag, and yet I was prevented from sleep. And so I was so agitated, and I had an argument with the callers as a result. I know, Mr. Commissioner, this is not regulated by law at all at present. If there is no legislation, you can do nothing about them. Will you propose to the Bureau so there will be legislative amendments to regulate such cold calls, particularly with regard to the jumping in the numbers of complaints? Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, if you can start an argument in the middle of the night, I'm sure you are in combating mode all the time. Commissioner, with regard to direct marketing calls, well, you can tell the caller that you do not want to receive the call again, and if he calls again, it is criminal. But the penalty is not severe at all. After the amendment, the penalty has been enhanced, and theoretically, there should be a bigger deterrent. If there is this breach, the highest penalty can be $500,000 in fine and imprisonment for 3 years. The deterrent should be there. And because of this, we can see more complaints about such cases. But since this involves criminal investigation, we have to refer them to the police. And prosecution and conviction figures are not satisfactory. And we have already reflected our views to the 2 departments. We hope there will be improvements.
Well, the number of complaints, I think they are just the tip of the iceberg. This certain bank has called me up a number of times, and I told the caller that actually I'm a LegCo member and you are causing a nuisance here. And he called, surprisingly, a second time. I was infuriated. I think you are not able to enforce the law. I've never seen a fine of $500,000 being imposed so far. So I think you should lodge a complaint with the Commissioner, Mr. Wong. Well, can my expression of this situation be considered a complaint by the Commissioner? Perhaps the Commissioner should consider tightening up the relevant laws to curb the situation. And then the police should enforce the law more stringently too. Commissioner, I heard loud and clear Mr. Wong's grievance, but if we're talking about complaint, follow up by prosecution and so on, I have to get concrete information before I can make the referral. Now, we have issued a set of guidelines educating people how to opt out from such direct marketing calls. I do have the caller's number. I can show the numbers to you, Commissioner. Well, perhaps you can lodge a formal complaint. Mr. Chan Kin-po, I want to ask a question about the paragraph 21, legal assistance scheme. I have asked a question about the principles for the scheme. Commissioner, can you tell us, under what circumstances would you be providing assistance to the applicants? Would you be just providing the assistance for cases where the cases which are controversial legally? We explained in detail to applicants for the scheme, and that the criteria are manifold. First, whether the case involves a principle of law, and also whether the applicants have other resources and that they don't need the assistance for seeking compensation, and also whether the case really involves a breach of the ordinance after thorough investigation. All these are factors that we would take heed of. Will certain factors carry heavier weighting? Say, if a case carries or is related to a principle of law, would that be considered more? No. We will look at a basket of factors. This is the scheme has just been kick-started. And we look forward to cases, new cases, where a principle of law is concerned, and we can help the applicants. I want to follow up on Mr. Wong's question. And some people called us up and said that they just randomly call people's mobile phones account numbers. So are these cases covered under the ordinance? Now, if they call up randomly a number, say, and they're not using the data subject's data, so these are not covered under the ordinance. But at the same time, the AFCA has certain measures to combat such activities. So if a person doesn't want to receive these DM calls, he can register with the AFCA and refuse taking such calls. Chairman, well, they may call up, say, randomly for the first time, and I told him not to call again. If they call us again or call me again, will they be governed under the law? Now, if personal data are involved, say he can name you and he can give you the background and so on and so forth, then that would be covered under the law. What's most important in a complaint case is that we have sufficient information, and then we will follow up duly. I believe that they are randomly calling my number. I believe that, but I have cautioned them not to call me again. Now, if they call again, will they be governed under your ordinance, or should we take the cases to AFCA? Well, Chairman, we have to look at individual cases. If they call up a second time, is it because they have obtained certain information from you during the first call, and they use that information to call you up again a second time to do marketing? Or in the second call, they are just doing it, calling up randomly. So, I mean, these are the factors we will consider. So how probable is are these calls randomly made? First time, second time, or third time? Have there been many such complaints previously? At this juncture, Chairman, we are now conducting an investigation. OFCA, its services are more targeted at DM calls, the sort of DM calls mentioned by Mr. Chan. Many people are concerned about such situations. We are now conducting a self-initiated investigation, and we'll try to get some updated information. The last time that we were doing such a survey was 4 to 5 years ago. So are these still activities rampant? And people claim that they are randomly calling up people, but in fact they are not. So we would be looking at the situation if we found that there is infringement of privacy data rights, and then we will follow up. Now, if we find that OFCA is a more appropriate body to follow up on the cases, then we'll refer to the cases to OFCA to see if they can follow up. Now, nobody else is on the queue, so allow me to ask a question. Paragraph 22. Data user returns scheme. DURS. Is this scheme going on, or has that never been started, or are you still conducting a consultation on that? No, that has never been rolled out. We published a consultation document in 2011, and the response was not very good, negative. And the EU found similar systems full of flaws. So we would rather wait until a review of the EU has been completed. And the latest information we get is that it's very probable that EU will shelve the plan altogether, or the scheme altogether. Now, but it doesn't mean that we would sit here and do nothing, but rather we are launching a more effective program to enhance data protection, and that is supported by the various sectors. Well, in the interest of time, I think we must end the discussion of this item. Very sorry. Our apology, Commissioner, for being late in starting this agenda. If there is no AOB, I'll declare the meeting adjourned.